Hi there. Have we met before? If not, I'm Kylie, aka the devil on your shoulder, the wind beneath your wings. Maybe I'm a cult leader, maybe I'm not. I am the haunted hippie. Welcome. Now back to this doll that had a lot to say about me the other day. If I had brought my Chucky t-shirt home with me, then that's what I would be wearing today, but seeing as I did not, I put this Funko Pop in the corner over here. You already know whose side of the beef I'm on. That's right, today we're not only talking about the first horror release of the year, but we're talking about the beef too. I'm gonna start with all the drama and the marketing because it's been fascinating, to say the least. I think it might be a historical first that a studio head went in full drag to the premiere of their horror movie. Then I'll get into all the spoiler-free behind-the-scenes kind of stuff that I can, including a whole bunch of interviews from the cast and crew. Then I'll get into all the spoiler-free thoughts that I can. Then I'll top off the spoiler-free section of this video with my recommendations. So who should spend their hard-earned coin going to see this film? And at the very end, I'll include a very, very brief kind of plot breakdown. I'm not going to go too in-depth. I'm just going to kind of cover all the plot points that support my opinions about this movie. If you've been around, you know that sometimes I go very in-depth with my plot breakdowns, but that's just not going to be the case today because this is a very fresh release. So of course you'll be warned once spoilers start, but that won't be until way at the end. And never fear, there are timestamps linked down below as always if you want to skip around. But before we even get started, I would love for you to subscribe because the alternative would be sacrificing your firstborn to me, and neither of us want that. I don't make the rules, I just do what the intrusive thoughts in my head tell me to. They also said that you should click the like button and the notification bell, and honestly that's one of the best ideas they've had in a while. And if at any point you want to go ahead and leave a comment, the algorithm gods would be most pleased. And I have a feeling you'll have a lot to say about this one, not just with the movie itself, but all the marketing and stuff. The studios are writing so unbelievably hard for this movie. It all started back in October. I'm sure that you recall the beef between M3gan and Chucky, and if not, these tweets right here kind of sum it all up. I went over that portion of the drama, if you will, in my most anticipated horror movies of 2023 video, and that marketing was genius enough as it was. They were riding on the hype of Chucky season 2, and I think that that boosted the popularity of both of the releases. Interestingly, I guess this has led to a push for a crossover movie, which Don Mancini himself has actually commented on. He said that while he hasn't seen the movie, a crossover is something that sounds fun to him, and he would potentially be interested in doing it. And in one of the interviews I watched, James Wan seems on board for the idea too.
I would love to see the Avengers of creepy puppet dolls. Them coming together, a versus version, or them teaming together to take on a more powerful entity. I want to see that version.
I would honestly pay good money to see that, and I think that there would be an ungodly amount of hype from queer audiences especially. Have I mentioned how unbelievably hard the gays are writing for M3gan? As a part of the rainbow flag myself, I do see a lot of queer reactions to pop cultural moments, and they've completely adopted her. I think it's the sassiness and the viral dancing that really roped them in. The Chucky TV show is also very gay. It's very much a self-insert for Don Mancini to explore his youth through the character of Jake. So could you imagine the rainbow tidal wave of support that would arise should there ever be a crossover? What are your thoughts on that? Anyway, let's move on to more of the marketing. Again, I've already showed you some clips from their little dance at their premiere or multiple screenings, I'm not sure. I've also already showed you Jason Blum, founder of Blumhouse Productions, in his M3gan drag. You absolutely love to see it. That's also how you know that they know how gay horror fans are. They were like, listen, Jason, they're gonna eat this up and it's gonna be a fraction of the cost of a billboard spot. And he said, you son of a bitch, I'm in.
It's unreal. I just keep looking at Lauren, his wife, who's now seen him in this twice, so I love it.
I also don't know the last time I've seen a studio head so excited for one of their releases, and maybe it's legit. My theory though is that they knew that this was kind of how they would be able to rope teenagers into seeing this movie. If you weren't aware, I don't know if this is just a rumor flying around or if this is true, but this was originally shot to be much gorier. It was gonna be rated R, and then they cut that down for a PG-13 theatrical release. It seems they thought that it would be better to cater this movie to teens, and that's what all these marketing stunts kind of seem to be geared towards. Because I shouldn't have to explain that obviously my generation, Gen Z, we are the most involved probably with social media, and so that's how you market to us. But let's go over just some of the videos and pictures that I've nabbed from Twitter to give you a taste of this lunacy. This group of actors, dancers, I don't know their deal, they're going to work. I mean, really, they're going on vacation, but they are going everywhere. Like, they went to M3gan boot camp. Oh, first of all, before I even get into the Twitter stuff, they went on the Today Show and they were like creeping behind Allison as she was being interviewed. And this was really funny. I don't know if this was scripted or not.
Not to creep you out, but she's right behind you right now.
Right now?
Right now. Actually, there's 6 of them, right? Look at them.
Oh, yeah.
Just staring at us.
There they are. Totally normal. This is just part of my life now.
By the way, no one told us these ladies were coming, and they scared Dylan Dreyer. She's trying to do the weather, and these 6 creepy M3gan dolls are all looking at her.
And then she was being interviewed by Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show, and her interview got interrupted so that M3gan could do a little dance. And then Jimmy Fallon is just doing his darndest to act scared and build hype in the audience to go see the movie. But let's go over all this Twitter madness, okay? So first of all, they're in New York. I think that they are currently in New York. I'm going from the most recent pictures and videos to the least recent. So there they are, cute group picture. Then they were on their way, I think, to the Today Show, and this is them just walking around town and doing their little hippity-hoppity kind of thing, walking in a line. But this is what I'm talking about, where I tell you they don't go anywhere not in character. You'll see that very much so. This is just yet another example of them doing their little dance. Oh, and Allison walks by. They love doing this dance. The choreography has not changed no matter where they perform it, which I guess is fine, because only people like us who are following the account and whatnot are going to be following their every move. I think this has definitely helped to get a very wide range of eyes on this marketing. Oh, then they went to a Chargers game and there was this big ad for them up on the big screen. What do you call that? A Jumbotron. Oh, and this is them going down the escalator and they're just never not in character. I'm telling you, even just walking around. So I imagine the second they leave their hair and makeup station in the dressing room or something, they are in character. Even the girl at the end, if you caught that, she like stares into the camera like a doll. Oh, and then I love this. The fan cam goes on them at the Chargers game and they're like, ee. Oh, they also went on top of the Empire State Building. Iconic, iconic. They also posted a bunch of pictures up there as well. Oh, this one also from the Rockefeller Center, I think. Or no, is that where the Chargers are? I don't know. I don't know my landscapes very well. The point is, all the M3gans basically were on vacation. I think this is at Universal City Walk. Well, it is. I just mean I don't know if it's the one in Hollywood or the one in Florida. That's them before the Chargers game. Very cute. Another one at the Empire State Building. They're just taking pictures, building memories. They took one with the King Kong hand. Very cute. Just doing all the touristy stuff, you know? Oh, almost forgot to mention, they did like a minute-long performance for the halftime show at the Chargers game, and yep, it's the same choreography. Oh, she also was on the cover of Fangoria, but I already talked about that in my most anticipated 2023 video. The last thing that I wanted to point out is this really cool little shout out to Scream, because you know I love Scream. So they're on the subway in character, of course, as they always are. And she said, "Me and my besties are here and ready for you. Let's see who screams first." It makes you wonder though, I mean, are they in character all the time as they're walking around so that pedestrians see them and they're like, oh my god, what's going on there? Or does the person who's in charge of their social media just tell them when they're whipping out the phone and to kind of like snap into character? Because if they're performing nonstop, that has to be exhausting. And it's like, already, I'm sold. I love this trend though. I wish that all horror movies had ridiculous marketing like this. It's so much more fun than watching a trailer. There's kind of a growing movement that I am a part of where people don't want to watch trailers anymore because they give too much away. So this kind of marketing benefits all around because I'm entertained, I'm intrigued, it gives us something to talk about, and none of the movie is spoiled for me this way, aside from the fact that obviously this robot doll is gonna dance at some point. That was the first clip of the trailer to ever go viral. There was quite literally no possible way to avoid that. And then this torrent of marketing ensued after that, and I had this theory that that was why they chose to go with this guerrilla style of marketing, and that was pretty much confirmed for me by this here interview.
And then once we started seeing people reacting to it on Twitter, we were like, oh, this is the best case scenario. People are having so much fun with her. They seem to understand like what her energy was, which was the best. Like, she's a very specific vibe.
I also love how Jason is just in drag in the background of this interview, but maybe they did it also because of the success of the smile marketing. I had not really seen anything like this before. I've heard of a lot of really cool viral marketing campaigns in the past, but I personally had never seen anything like this before. And it's such a clever, cheap option for the studio because, I mean, what, it costs them them maybe a few $100 in transportation and for the ticket and like $20 for someone to DIY that shirt. And then that clip got millions upon millions of views, and that translated probably to at least a couple 100,000 tickets. Maybe studios are finally realizing that we want to go back to fun, unique types of marketing rather than watching trailers that basically spoil the entire movie. I know that I'm biased because I avoid trailers at all costs, but I think that this marketing is fun for everyone. And if there's one thing about humans that I know to be true, it is that we love war. We love fighting. If you give us two opposing sides, oh, we're gonna pick one. Exhibit A, see the beginning of this video. Finally, marketing teams are getting smart anyway. I know that doesn't interest everyone, but marketing can have such a huge influence on the culture surrounding a movie, and I really enjoy dissecting it. Hi, I'm editing. I think that the biggest takeaway from this also is that it's paid off. All the reporting about the box office numbers from this past weekend are that M3gan is overperforming, and you know why? It's because people know that the movie exists. Because the marketing is cool and interesting. They're doing all these guerrilla techniques to get more eyes on it. I just can't believe we're finally circling back to this, because if you guys recall, the marketing campaign for the Blair Witch Project is probably one of the most famous ones ever done. Why did we stop doing that? Why did things stop being cool after the early 2000s? Well, I think it was 2013 when the remake of Carrie came out. There was a number that you could call and Carrie would pick up, and there would be like different options. You could call it multiple times and kind of get different answers and different results. It's kind of been crickets ever since then. I mean, let's bring this back. What are we waiting for? Smile and now M3gan are proving me right. We need this marketing. How about we shift gears though and we start getting into some of these cast and crew interviews. This was a combined effort of two of the biggest names in horror. We have Jason Blum of Blumhouse Productions and James Wan of the Atomic Monster Studio, which if you weren't aware, they are currently in the process of merging companies.
We're working towards concluding an agreement where we would be two merged companies, which would be really exciting. I think what would be in store for horror fans if that happens is more great original horror movies, and then obviously we'd be working with IP too, but trying to keep those movies also feeling kind of fresh and new and different. I think that's one of the things the two companies do well on their own and would do even better together.
I feel conflicted about this because I don't want the horror genre to feel monopolized the way that Marvel is right now, but they claim that it will lay groundwork for more original horror content, so I'm hoping for the best. Anyway, they were executive producers alongside Allison Williams, and according to everyone, they knew that they wanted her for the role right from the very beginning.
And was he like, hey, I have the next project for you?
Yeah, he literally emailed me, and it was like a bat signal kind of an email. One of those things you can't really turn down, even though I didn't want to. He was like, we need you. And I was like, oh God, okay.
Yeah.
What do you need, another like evil white girl? And he was like, kind of.
In several interviews, she was also asked how she found being an executive producer, and it seems like it was a purely positive experience. Even when she didn't have the official title on other features that she worked on, she always wanted to be very involved with all the logistics of a production. Now she had just been cleared for all of the producers' emails, and she got to sit in on all the producers' meetings. She's an extremely devoted individual when it comes to any of her duties though, whether it be producing or acting. She spoke about how she was in talks for the role for over a year actually, because the pandemic kind of delayed things. That gave her a lot of time to research for the role. She had a whole document that she made about her character's life history. She met with women in STEM, women in robotics to get a feel for their career, and apparently even having all of the logistical input as a producer informed the role as well.
I found that it like deepened my experience as an actor because it allowed my investment to be like as deep as I always want it to be. I was able to just feel like I had kind of a 360 point of view on what was going on.
Now, you and I probably know her best as Rose from Get Out, which is a pretty frightening character. It certainly informs her casting because she kind of became synonymous with evil in that role. However, she actually felt that it worked to her benefit both in The Perfection and in M3gan.
And then going into this, I just think now a healthy amount of skepticism or distrust is really an interesting way to know that an audience is going to go into watching anything. In theory, that's how we should go into every movie. Yeah. But in the old model of our business, when you have movie stars, you know they're going to be the protagonist in every movie. But at least now I'm in this space that's really fun where you start watching M3gan and you see Gemma and you're like, I don't know if I can trust her. I don't know if I'm on board with her yet. I'm going to reserve judgment. And that's exactly what we want you to do with this movie.
I had never thought about it like that, but I can definitely see how the viewing experience would be benefited from not trusting this character and not knowing what her true intentions are, because she is the one who creates M3gan. So naturally there is a bit of moral gray area when it comes to to your passion project, the things that you create. M3gan was also obviously a fascinating thing to learn about, how she was brought to life on screen. Her look was achieved through a big blend of practical animatronics, 2 child actors, and a bit of CGI. This was done in an effort to make her appear very human from afar, but then quite uncanny up close. This was also not the most comfortable situation for the actors, and apparently she was kind of a pain to work with.
When I first met her, she was in repose, and that was deeply chilling. She was just alone in like a corner of a soundstage. People were doing camera tests off on one side, and she was next to like a table with props. And I just walked in and she was just standing there, and I was like, I'm not gonna survive this movie. It was a challenge, I will put it that way. Of all the co-stars I've ever had, all of whom have been lovely, she was by far the most temperamental and challenging. But I will say that that kind of effort literally took every department working together. And that's the kind of stuff that just brings a crew together and makes an experience really special from like a meta standpoint.
I think it was also on The Tonight Show where Allison was talking about the fact that sometimes her eyelids would get stuck, and so then they would have to put lubricant directly on her eyeball, which freaked her out. And because she could move and speak, I do imagine that it would be quite weird to just see her kind of sitting on the table with all the props during filming breaks. And big shout out to the girls that played her. Her movements were top notch. Shifting gears though, someone who also definitely deserves a shout out is Akilah Cooper, who wrote the screenplay. The story was conceived of by James Wan, but also much like Malignant, she was the one who wrote the screenplay. In both cases, James shepherded her, but in either case, she took the reins.
I mean, that's what I love about Kayla is just how brave she is. She's so not afraid to lean into things that may be a bit outrageous. But what she does so well is she goes, okay, if this stuff is kind of crazy big, I'm gonna try and balance it out with more sort of human element. I worked with Kayla on that, on the story early on, sort of crafting and shaping it, kind of like, I kind of pride myself on being a bit of a puppet aficionado, if you will.
She's an exciting rising star in the horror genre. I'm excited to see what she does next. She does have a writing credit on The Nun 2, so we'll see how that one turns out. The director of this film was Gerard Johnston, and Wan and Blum had discovered him through his 2014 horror film Housebound. I put that one on my list because I'd never seen it, and apparently it's a subversion of the haunted house subgenre. But he spoke a bit about his influences for this movie and surprisingly referenced The British Office. His background is mostly in comedy, actually, so that informed the tone of this movie. Speaking of the tone, I think I already mentioned that this was originally going to be rated R, but then it was cut down to be PG-13. But in the Dead Meat interview, Jason Blum seemed to kind of deny that this was the case, because they spoke a lot about the fact that you never go into making a movie with that intention.
We didn't set out to make. You can't set out to make a movie
Just
with
for
the
rating
first.
yeah.
Yeah, you got to set out to make a good movie and then see what happens.
Yeah.
So was anything else filmed that might be released on a further release that might be more explicit, or is this just the movie that was shot?
This is it.
Okay.
This is all we got.
James also mentioned that no movie needs to be a specific rating, it just needs to be whatever it's gonna be. For example, when he was making The Conjuring, he thought that he was making a PG-13 film. There's really no gore in that movie, not a lot of violence, just a lot of very disturbing imagery, but the MPAA disagreed, and so it was rated R. This is a movie where I hope to the gods that we get this elusive original R-rated cut, because now it is time to get into my spoiler-free thoughts. This movie is so generic. I held back a bit when I was showing those interview clips where they're talking about how the screenwriter doesn't hold back. With Malignant, I'd be like, yeah, I get that. With M3gan, I'm like, where? The only way that this movie could have pushed any type of boundaries is with the gore, because this exact movie has been made before. In their interviews, Wan and Blum talk about how the evil doll subgenre is very well trodden, but they neglect to mention the Child's Play remake at all. They talked about the original Child's Play a lot, but nobody said a peep about the remake. I have a feeling it's because they don't want to draw attention to the fact that they made a hauntingly similar film, just with less gore. Like, if I wanted to watch an evil AI doll movie, why would I choose the one with less gore and the one that doesn't have Mark Hamill voicing the doll? This movie is so tame, it doesn't push any boundaries except for maybe the context with which they explore AI. It's sort of about the end game of AI, and they referenced it as sort of an Annabelle meets Terminator. But really, narrative-wise, it doesn't get pushed any farther than the Child's Play remake from 2019. Emotionally, there are some much more impactful things that happen in M3gan, but I would say that the climax especially is much more tame in comparison. I do think the acting is much better in M3gan. Allison Williams is such a raw talent, and I think that Violet McGraw is too. I think this movie mostly just suffered from half-baked writing. They didn't take it far enough with the horror, they didn't take it far enough with the comedy. It just seems like they didn't really commit to either. I was never scared, and I think I laughed maybe 1 or 2 times. It just exists in this weird middle state of mediocrity to me. And I don't think it does that much besides saying screen time bad, but I'll get more into the themes in the spoiler section. It does shine a little bit in terms of themes, but it still doesn't go far enough in my opinion. As far as my recommendations go, who is the intended audience? It's not me. I actually think that this is very much intended for a teen audience. I think it's a movie made for people who go out to the theater maybe once a month, maybe every other month, who just want to be entertained. I was entertained. It's only an hour and a half long, so it's a good length. I see this being more of a movie where 14-year-olds will go with their very first boyfriend or girlfriend, and maybe there's a jump scare that lets them hold their partner's hand for the first time. I think that's what this movie can do for its audience. Or I see it being the one horror movie that a Marvel fan chooses to watch in a year. January seemed like a good place to stick this movie because it's not doing much new, but nothing else is really coming out right now. Its only competition is Avatar, and it's just not rewriting the manual on evil AI movies. It's just entertaining, and that's all it needs to be for some people. I was let down because I saw opportunities for improvement where I think this actually could have broken new ground. I don't like when movies play it safe like this, especially because last year James Wan gave us Malignant, but I also just need to come to terms with the fact that I'm just not the target audience for this movie. I thought I was because people were saying, oh, if you like Freaky, if you like Happy Death Day, you're gonna love this movie. But both of those movies are far, far more absurd. They lean into the really slapstick, gore-heavy kills and the comedy. Like I mentioned, M3gan does neither of those things. M3gan didn't even go for any kind of low-hanging fruit type humor, which I don't enjoy, but at least it would have given it a little bit more of an air of absurdity. So take all of that and hopefully let it inform you whether or not you want to go see this movie. I don't think it really matters what I say because it is overperforming at the box office, and I'll never complain about that with a horror movie. I think it went way beyond their projections for its opening weekend, especially going up against Avatar. So to that I say yay, cheers, yay for horror. But maybe catch it at a matinee so it's a little cheaper, I don't know. All that being said, let's go into a very brief spoiler territory here with a bit of a plot breakdown, but more of a focus on the themes. First of all, just a couple of things that I want to point out, want to pull out a few more interview snippets. So the theme of this movie is about the end game of AI. I did not find it to be reaching very far. I think that this is a possibility. I think that there are millions of parents out there who would 100% take on this M3gan character in their family to kind of act as a third parent. Because all those mundane sort of everyday little tasks, who wouldn't want those taken care of by somebody else? But the director has something very interesting to say about this.
As crazy as M3gan is, I don't think this is too far-fetched to assume that when we have someone that can do the things that M3gan can do, that we would sort of shift some of those parental duties to it, because it's hard. Like, parenting is really hard, and why wouldn't you? At the same time, it's like, once you do that, just don't expect to get your kid back.
He has young children of his own, which I think definitely informed him upon the kind of creation of this movie during pre-production. You can definitely tell how it informed his vision, because also in that same interview, I think he was talking about how he was at a family barbecue or something with a bunch of kids, and rather than them all watching a movie together or all playing together, all of them were on their own individual devices. And so he sees a real lack of socialization happening between these children now. So I think this movie was coming from definitely a much more personal place for him, and I get it, I do. There's also definitely something to be said about the fact that the child actor in this movie, despite probably having seen the movie herself now, she started to develop an attachment to the doll. This movie, as they were making it, became much more meta than maybe anyone expected, or maybe they did, I don't know. But take a listen to this.
When I was alone in the car when we were filming in the forest, I was actually talking to her, even though it wasn't a scene. So I was like, I wish she would let me bring you home. And if I had one in real life, I would love to play with her and do all that fun stuff with her. She'd be like a sister to me.
That was very eerie to me. That really, I don't know, that made me uncomfy, because she knows the movie that she's making, or maybe because she's so young, she's not so aware of what they're doing. I don't know how much input she got from the director to inform her performance, but I would imagine quite quite a lot because at certain points of this movie, she is throwing tantrums, and the acting is amazing, by the way. Like, this little girl, I think she's going places. She's committed. But the fact that even with all of that, she's still like, yeah, I think that if I had a doll like that, she'd be like a sister to me. Have we learned nothing? Have we? I mean, I don't know if I have, because honestly, I kind of still want a M3gan. I just don't see something like this happening in real life because yes, people are greedy. Yes, they want to push production. And I mean, well, let's take a look at Tesla, right? Yes, profit is generally put over human life, but when you have somebody who's smart running a company, they think about things like liability. Men who lose $200 billion in the span of like a year, they're not really thinking too hard about things like that. So I personally would still want a M3gan in real life. I don't think I'd ever be too old to want a doll like that. She just seems very useful. I think I would mostly use her for like my personal chef. I would have her cook for me. And she'd make a really good security system. Anyway, so that kind of covers the themes. I think that they were handled really well, especially because of the acting of Violet McGraw. The emotional impact of having a doll like that, of her forming this emotional bond to it after trauma. I think that was a way that they definitely expanded on the emotion of the movie in comparison to Child's Play from 2019. However, the story beats themselves are just eerily far too similar, because the opening of the movie, if you recall, opens exactly like Child's Play 2019 with a sort of spoof parody version of a children's toy ad. That felt pretty bold, and I know I'm kind of stuck on this comparison, but did they think we wouldn't notice? I'm just confused. Then Katie's parents are killed. That's how she ends up staying with her genius aunt of the toy company. And the central conflict seems to be that they need to figure out a way to come together in this new version of their life, and also that Gemma needs to deliver a new toy to her boss. I thought that everything in this movie was actually set up so well, but weirdly almost too well, to the point where I knew everything that was gonna happen. For example, there is a scene in the beginning where Gemma is with her colleagues and they're, I guess, like testing sort of the prototype of M3gan, and her little brain thing, what's it called, a CPU, I don't know, computer lingo, it explodes. And so once that happened, I was like, oh, so that's exactly how they're gonna defeat her later on. Oh, she suffered trauma from losing her parents? Well, okay, obviously that's how the doll is gonna get close to her and manipulate her later. Oh, this dog keeps getting through the fence? Obviously someone's gonna get hurt and M3gan's gonna do something about that later. I guess it's a compliment to say that everything they set up in this movie eventually had payoff, but none of it subverted my expectation. That's where my main issue is, I guess, because I was never shocked. And not all of that is even necessarily saying, oh, well, I've just seen this movie before. It's just a matter of it being entirely too predictable. Like I said though, I think the emotional manipulation aspect of the story was really effective. I love seeing the progression of Katie developing an attachment to this doll, and eventually how she comes to terms with that with Gemma later on, and how Gemma is saying, you should feel terrible, M3gan is just a distraction, and essentially an addiction. I think it's a good allegory for how people slip into bad things like that when they are suffering loss. And yet, I'm still a little bummed that everything ultimately came down to Gemma and Katie and M3gan. I wanted to see a massive slaughter at the grand reveal of M3gan. I wanted to see Gemma and crew tied up, or a couple of them be killed, I don't know, heaven forbid. And I wanted to see M3gan kind of start to take over the world. I would have preferred if this left on more of an ominous note. I mean, granted, it did because they destroyed the doll, but obviously she had paired with their sort of Alexa thing in their house. Oh, on that note, real quick, this is related to the tagline that Jason Blum thinks the sequel should have.
Yeah, I think that's good. There's nowhere to hide from AI. I think that's kind of good. That'll be the tagline for the sequel. There's nowhere to hide from AI.
Anyway, so back to me wanting a massive slaughter towards the end at the grand reveal of M3gan. They couldn't do that because that's exactly what happened at the end of Child's Play 2019. So I don't know if maybe it was kind of a situation where they're like, hey, if you're gonna copy my homework, just change it up a little bit so that they don't notice. But that was done for a reason in Child's Play 2019. It's much more exciting to see a child's toy taking over an entire store of toys and have them all start attacking people, rather than watching a doll go crazy on a couple of gals in like a glorified garage. It does set it up better for a sequel, I suppose, but even so, it just felt a little bit anticlimactic, especially because they ultimately kill M3gan just by stabbing, I think, a screwdriver or something into her little brain. It was cool when she got ripped in half, but I just didn't feel like it was enough of a payoff for me. So that's why I'm a little bit more hell-bent on wanting more gore in this movie, because if you're gonna show me a movie that I have already seen before, at least make the kills really creative, make them something we haven't seen before. I don't think I'd ever seen a paper cutter kill. That one was fun, especially because that's when she's doing her little dance. But beyond that, nothing about this movie really wowed me. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. It's just not one that I see myself revisiting. I do see a lot of people that are loving this movie though, and so I'm happy for ya. I suppose that I would be interested in a sequel because I think having an entire AI house that's attacking you would be much more fascinating, just because I don't think that's been done since that really, really goofy, god-awful Disney Channel original movie that did that in the 90s, I think. I don't even remember what that movie's called. I don't think I've ever even seen the whole thing. But it's high time that was actually done well. And now our modern technology has almost actually caught up to that, so it's more of a feasible kind of scary thing. The one part where I did feel like this movie got pretty dark, where I felt like they pushed the boundaries, was definitely when she killed the child. I think ripping his ear off was fun and gross, but I was not expecting him to get hit by a car, though I do think that's clever because it sort of covers Megan's tracks. Another moment where I felt like there was a lot of lack is that Gemma never really seemed to have trouble with the police. They sort of start to set up this conflict where they come back to the house and she's like, I don't know what happened to the dog. And they're like, actually, your neighbor's dead. And also, we know that you were there when that child died the other day. I thought that would pose more of an issue, maybe in the sequel, but I don't know. Even James Wan in an interview was like, I don't like to talk about sequels. The movie's not even out yet.
I don't like to talk about sequels so early on because the movie isn't out yet. I'm just only because I'm superstitious. But what I will say to that is any of my movies, you know, like whether it's, you know, the Conjuring universe or Saw, you know, we like to think of a bigger world and then sort of like building this bigger world and then going into that and go, okay, I'm telling this particular story.
So I don't know how much of a sequel is on their mind. I think also in that interview, he did mention how when they're creating a movie in pre-production, they are thinking about the larger world. But I don't know if that means that they wrote this with a sequel already in mind. Yes, they set it up for one, but that also is kind of a cop-out thing that they do a lot of the time just in case a movie performs well. So we shall see. That's gonna do it for today though. I hope that you enjoyed this review. If you made it to the end, if you've already seen the movie, if not, just glad to have you here. If you'd like even more bonus content from me though, you can find that linked down below on my Patreon. So yes, a huge thank you to these lovely people whose names are on screen. Over there, I do generally first reactions to brand new horror movies. So my latest one was obviously me and my dad reacting to M3gan, but those are always spoiler free. It's just so that these guys get first dibs basically on my opinions on whether or not they should go see a new movie. But I also do it for older movies too, and sometimes they include spoiler sections, like I did that for Tusk. I very recently did that for The Mist from 2007, just things like that. But if none of that is for you, then all the rest of my social media is linked down below, so go check it out, check out my affiliate codes. But other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this review, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!